The government is in the second phase of the COVID-19 vaccine rollout, and citizens above the age of 60 have started receiving their shots. In Mangaung in the Free State, seniors could not be vaccinated because of a shutdown over service delivery, and this resulted in the blockage of 15 roads. The shutdown involved the blocking of roads with bricks, rocks, debris and burning tyres, regrettably negatively affecting those who are not part of the protest. The question is whether shutdowns are afforded the protection under Section 17 of the Constitution, which guarantees and protects the right to protest in a manner that is peaceful and unarmed. To speak to us more about this, I'm joined by attorney on the right to protest at the Centre for Applied Legal Studies, Stanley Malematja. Stanley, very good morning. Thank you for coming on to the show. I suppose the first question is, what constitutes a legal protest?
Good morning and thank you for having me. What constitutes a legal protest is that we have to look into Section 17 of the Constitution, which says that everybody has a right to protest as long as they are peaceful and they are unarmed. So now the question becomes, what does peaceful mean? The moment you engage in any type of violence, your protest loses the protection of the Constitution. Now, there's a very fine line between your protest losing the protection of the Constitution and you acting in a manner that is violent. And I think we saw it in Mangaung. So people always say, no, we just blocked roads. But unfortunately, there's a court case saying that even a non-violent protest can actually constitute public violence. So the moment you start blocking roads, like what we saw in Mangaung, the moment the elderly couldn't receive their jabs because people were protesting and blocking roads, even though they were not violent, that can still constitute public violence.
But also, it also impacted school kids because many of the kids weren't able to go to school.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, with the protest and with the shutdown, and we are not saying that shutdowns are like prima facie unconstitutional or illegal or unlawful. But what we are saying is that when you are protesting, the moment you interfere on or impact on other person's rights, then it becomes a problem. Because now, if a child is not able to go to school, we know how fundamental the right to education is. So I think this is us saying to protesters that next time, I think they need to go back to the drawing board. They need to take their anger to the relevant person. They need to take their anger to the municipality, you know, in Mangaung, and not take their anger to school children, to the elderly who are supposed to receive their jobs. Like, I mean, blocking the roads on its own, it affects a lot of fundamental rights.
But here's the thing about a protest, though. The protest, in my mind, is meant to create discomfort, not just for the perpetrator, say the council in Mangaung, but certainly the people around it in order to exert pressure.
You are definitely correct, and this is how I phrase it. A protest in most of the, in most cases, it results in what I call forced solidarity. It doesn't matter. When people are protesting, it doesn't matter whether you are with them or you are against them. But at the end of the day, they are going to impact on your rights. I remember when I went to Palabora to go and bail out 14 protesters, I was stopped by protesters myself. They just stood right in the middle of the road. And I couldn't move and I couldn't do anything. So it is forced solidarity. So protest it's all about, if the government is not going to listen to what we are saying, we are going to impact their innocent citizens so that they listen to us. But unfortunately, my brother, here's the trap. I think, in my opinion, that the government has set a very good trap. They wait for people to protest because people have been serving memorandums. We need to remember that protest is a matter of last resort. Blocking roads is a matter of last resort. People serve memorandums, but they are not being listened to. So when they start blocking the roads, here's the unfortunate part, and this is what I pick up also in my article, to say that the government has actually set up a trap so that once you start engaging in any conduct that impacts on other people's rights, what do they respond by doing? They respond by calling the police. They no longer respond by giving you water because you're protesting for water. You're protesting for access to service delivery. What does the government do? They respond by calling the police. Right now we saw in Mangaung, I think plus minus 14 people have been arrested and a child has died, right? So the question we need to ask ourselves, do people really have to block the roads for government to listen to them? Just for water like this, basic service. This is a basic service.
Well, it certainly appears that way. Stanley, let's hold that thought. We will be right back continuing that conversation with Stanley Malematja. Do stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. I'm in conversation with Stanley Malematja, and we're talking about the thin line between what is legal and illegal around protests. Now, in your definition, you talked about being armed. And if you're going to protest, then you should be unarmed. Now, we look at protesters carrying bricks, carrying rocks, carrying shambox, carrying sticks, right, which are not necessarily weapons until you hit someone or you throw it at someone. So obviously it almost talks to that thin line that you speak of.
So, you know, when we look at the question of being armed, that is if you look at Section 17 of the Constitution, being unarmed is one of the internal qualifiers. And when we talk about internal qualifiers, we talk about those, you know, those words or those subjects that give meaning to your right, to say at what point are you protected by the Constitution. Now, the moment you are armed, what is being armed during a protest? Now, the first point of go, we look at the Arms Act. Absolutely a knife, a gun, that is, you know, prima facie, you are armed. But now you look into when protesters are protesting and they're carrying like sticks and carrying shambox, right? Is that being armed or unarmed? And for me, the question is still before the court to say that sometimes in the African culture, we use sticks and shambox as a manner of celebratory. We celebrate carrying those things, dancing and everything. But the moment you strike someone with it, then you lose the protection of the Constitution. That's why, like the question of being armed and unarmed, it's very thin. People need to be, you know, just carrying, you can carry a placard. We want the mayor, blah, 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 to go down. That is not being armed. But the moment you are carrying a shambok, they look into that into that object. Can it cause someone harm? And if they find that it can, then it can be decided that you know, you are armed.
Is it the definition of protest universal, or is it specific to this country? And the reason I ask is, we look at protests across the globe and the nature of the protests, right? A lot of protests on our home soil turn violent. They involve bricks, blocking roads, etc., etc., in order for the authorities to act.
Absolutely. Look, it's universal. If you look into international law, you have the right to protest as long as you are peaceful and unarmed. But what we have seen in practice is that in most cases, when you are peaceful, nobody listens to you. There was a speech by Nelson Mandela in one of his Rivonia trials, in his appearances. He said that we will stand here, we will protest, we will picket until the apartheid government says, no, gentlemen, can we talk? Because we cannot have this situation continue. So that is the nature of protest. It is to cause disruptions. But unfortunately, I think in the Colenso case, there were women, only women, who were arrested during a protest. And they were charged for public violence. And their wrongdoing, according to the court, was that they instructed a truck driver to park his truck and block the road. The blockage only happened for an hour. And trust you me, the case went from the magistrates' court to the High Court to the Supreme Court, and it was dismissed in the Constitutional Court. The Constitutional Court confirmed that even if you are not violent, if you are conducting any action that can cause a disturbance to the rights of other people, then you can be charged with public violence. So now the question is that how do we protest now? Because protests are supposed to cause disturbance.
Well, let's talk a little. Let's get practical. Let's talk about the musicians and the entertainers, right? And the protest against Minister Nathi Mtetwa, right? And the sit-in or live-in, if you will, and what it was able to achieve. Almost nothing. Now let's go to Mangaung, right? Where individuals have concerns, citizens of the country have concerns. They blockade the street. Literally 24, 48 hours later, the premier has intervened. The city manager has been suspended. There is action. How then do you say to citizens, protest peacefully, when they do protest peacefully, there is no movement or traction in their cases?
I think that's a very good point. And I actually sat with the convener of the protest, the artists. They call themselves Abasad. protesting against the NAC, right?
Correct.
So what I call that, I call that the epitome of protest. But here's the thing, my brother, not everyone has the luxury to come into your office and sit there, right? We're talking about indigent people. Yes, at the same time when I'm saying that they must protest peacefully, I need to be cognizant of the fact that sometimes they don't get the results. But as and when they engage in some, actions which are not protected by the Constitution, then they get their answers. But my problem is that, I've dealt with a number of protesters who have been arrested. Trust you me, I think the government is setting a trap. Being in prison, being subjected to the criminal justice system is no joke. That thing deals psychologically with the people. And I think the government is doing this deliberately, not to respond to people so that they subject them to the criminal justice system, just to instill fear, right? Now, here's a good one. Although the mayor in Mangaung is going to be suspended, the city manager, thank you, the city manager. If we say now, let's apply the spirit of Ubuntu, can we go to a criminal court and say now, since the city manager is going to be, suspended, and you know why he or she is being suspended, can we say that those people who are arrested for public violence, can their charges be dropped?
I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there. Very interesting conversation. Stanley Malematja speaking about the right to protest at the Center for Applied Legal Studies. Thank you for coming on to the show.
Thank you.